So, hello and welcome, everybody. Um, so this is the first of the Women in IT sessions for this year's virtual conference, and I'm really excited about it. So the session is session 1A. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to everybody after the conference from the conference website. Okay, please place questions in the chat, and we can get to them later. And don't forget to send in your feedback later on. It will be session 1A. So today's presentation, we're talking about owning your origin story, embracing diversity and mentorship. Mentorship is a symbiotic relationship that benefits the mentor, the mentee, and the community they belong to. But what happens when that community is scattered across different cultural and technological backgrounds? In this presentation, we will explore the challenges and benefits of fostering a learning culture where everyone learns from one another and questions go both ways. We will talk about finding your niche in an apprentice program where you can prioritize authenticity and empathy without feeling intimidated. And we will also draw on practical examples from Rochelle's personal journey from Asia to Austria and discuss the lessons she learned while navigating a diverse workplace around the world. Our speaker today is Rochelle Ann Craw, and Rochelle is a software engineer at Beta System Software. She has 15 years of mainframe experience, including application development in ZOS, business analysis, software consulting, production support, systems operations, software provisioning using ZOSMF, and development for Zoe Explorer. In her current role, she enjoys developing new solutions for modern mainframe developers and advocating for them in an open mainframe project ambassador. So I'm going to leave it over to you now, Rochelle. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eileen. Yes, so you are in session 1A, Own Your Origin Story, Embracing Diversity in Mentorship. My name is Rochelle Ancro, and I'm a software engineer for Beta System Software. So today I want to start off by telling you about my origin story. So I started my mainframe career in Metro Manila in the Philippines. And that's where I had my foundation for my mainframe journey. Basically, I was hired as a programmer trainee, so I had basic training on COBOL, JCL, how to navigate ISPF, and so on. So a really good foundation for me and great introduction to mainframes in general. And so after a few years, there was some headhunters and recruiters from Singapore were hiring for specific mainframe skills. And so that's when I moved to Singapore. So I was introduced then to a more diverse Asian community. So it's still Asia. So there's some um, commonalities there, but it's now more diverse. And from my experience in the Philippines in a local bank, now I'm in a multinational company. So I'm dealing with multiple countries and so on. And after a few years, I moved to the Czech Republic. IBM hired me. Then I became like in part of a team supporting the back end. So again, a different type of working environment. And that was my first real experience in a European country. And so from Asia, now I'm in Europe, and I started communicating in different languages and so on. So that was my first real culture shock, for example. So my role in IBM was, as I said, a solutions provider for European banks and other institutions. And then I moved to a software vendor company where now I'm working with global colleagues from the US, from other parts of Europe, and so on. So again, more and more diverse. And so now currently I'm in Austria. That's my current base. My company is based in Berlin in Germany, but I am currently located in Austria. So in all of these stops, I learned the value of intercultural mentorship and collaboration. So each stop really taught me a new lesson in mentoring and in being part of communities across different cultures. And one of the first things that people ask me when they hear my origin story from all of these different places that I've lived and worked at are, what are the culture shocks, right? So I group them into three. So first is demographic. So when I started in Metro Manila in the Philippines, the percentage of women in my team was basically half and half. So my first mentors were women. In the next batch that came after me, um, again, they're half and half, half women, half men. And so there was a good percentage. So that was my normal. So when I went into the workforce straight from university, there was a good percentage of, or yeah, half of the people in my team were women. My manager was a my first manager was a woman. Our department head was a woman, and so on. So there was a percentage there. So to me, in my head, that was normal, right? And again, when I started, we were very homogeneous. It was we were Filipinos and so on. And then when I moved to Singapore and then to Czech Republic, for example, um, and now to Austria and working with German colleagues, it became more diverse, right? So it's not just about different nationalities. I also experienced different um, languages, different ethnicities, different types of um, demographic, basically. And as I already mentioned, I also had culture shock working in different industries. So from in-house development, multinational service providers, and independent software vendors, the way of working is very different. And the way that you tackle projects are very different from each of those industries. And then speaking of way of working, in some cultures, you have 24 by 7 on-call support, or you are basically expected to be 24 by 7 contactable, available. And then moving to Europe and now in Austria, for example, we have 25 days of personal time off. So to me, it was a bit of a culture shock because from coming from Asia, that it's a in Singapore, for example, to a place like here in Europe, the way of working is I have I have to give myself permission that it's good to rest. You deserve rest. So it's a culture shock. But in all of these culture shocks, to me, what I really value is mentorship, because it to me it helped me navigate all of these changes, all of these culture shocks, and it made transitions easier. And I value the mentors that I had, and also passing it on to the next batch of newbies. So that's why I talk about the symbiosis of mentorship. So I was a mentee, I became a mentor, and throughout my journey, I was part of a community that values this type of loop, of mentorship loop. So first, let's go to benefits for mentees. So as I said, I started as a programmer trainee. I was a mentee. I received guidance specific to the mainframe career, my skills. I learned the basics of everything. So it going through from Asia to Austria, essentially the same tools that I used before, I can still use now, right? It's the same ISPF emulator. It's the same JCL look and feel. The tools have changed, but we speak the same language basically, right? In terms of mainframe. And it's not just the skills, as I mentioned, navigating the workplace as a mentee. It's encouraging because you when when I was starting out, I see women as my leaders and so on. So I know how to model myself, the behavior that I see. I know that the career that I also want for myself. If I see them, I know that I can be something, and that could be me in the future, right? And so I'm gaining more and more confidence in my skills and in terms of navigating the workplace. Confidence also comes from managing mistakes and celebrating wins. So when I make a mistake, my mentors will encourage me and again tell me how to navigate this, how to manage it. But when I get some wins, we celebrate it together. So again, the confidence is building. And one of the things that I also value was the networking opportunities. So from my first mentors to now, they introduce me to recruiters, to hiring managers, or to even to within the company itself, you gain knowledge about who to ask. Um, the introduction themselves are valuable because there's some instant trust that will be provided to you because your mentor is connected with them, right? And so even now when I look into my connections, I have those colleagues that I can look up to, communicate with, and so on. So as a mentee, I benefited greatly from mentors. But now that I've moved to Europe and I've have more experience in mainframe, so I became a mentor. So I started teaching like JCL, mainframe modernization courses. So now I have that perspective of being the mentor. So I like that I get fresh perspectives and new eyes to look through and asking the why question. So I like that one of the questions that an apprentice asked me was, why are we doing this way, or what are we doing this for? So to me that gives fresh perspective, because as mentors or as people who has a lot of experience, we have always been doing things in a certain way, but it's good to hear from mentees, to for them to ask questions, be curious about why are we doing things a certain way, because it that pause is a way for us to also reflect, do we need to change things? Is it important to change these things, these processes? Is it still beneficial to us and to the company or to the community? So I think those fresh perspectives, those asking why questions, the step-by-step process, looking through those eyes is also very helpful for me. And then there's the concept of reflective growth. I like the quote, a rising tide lifts all boats. So it just means that, as I mentioned about managing mistakes and celebrating wins, when you celebrate the wins of your mentees, it also reflects on you. So I like when I see apprentices or other mentees that I've had the pleasure of dealing with, that they also receive this accolades, and knowing that one small part of it is because I taught them something. It reflects on me and how I understand the business and how I understand the projects that we are working in. And another benefit that um, I got from being a mentor is leadership development. So it's a good practice for communication, feedback skills, and so on. So to me, just paying it forward and also receiving the skills, it gives a good loop, because mentorship is a loop. It's mutual learning. It's not just from mentor to mentee, but it's mutual. So as a mentee, I gain confidence. As a mentor, I gain perspective. And because of that, our community is growing, because everyone contributes, everyone learns. So community is growing and growing. And so now mentees will become mentors and so on. So it becomes a loop um of growth. And I have been part of communities where mentorship has shaped it positively. So to me, I really value this community, this mentorship loop, where you become a mentee, you become a mentor, and you grow the community with that kind of environment. But now we come to a friction point, right? So what happens when mentors and mentees don't share culture, language, time zone, tools, technology, and more? So I call this the challenges in diverse communities. So I will focus on three things: communication, which is your feedback spectrum; technology, which is your tools and techniques; and mindset, which are commonalities and differences. So first is cultural feedback spectrum. So in my experience, I had three different, I grouped them in three different types of cultural feedback, right? Of giving feedback, giving and receiving feedback. First is when I started in Asia, in the Philippines, we give very indirect feedback. So there's a certain, um, the important part is subtlety, giving harmony, saving face. So that's a thing that in Asia, it's very important. Um, so when you do something good or something bad, it's not you did good, you did bad. There's always a certain bullet point thing, and it's very subtle. It's not, you're not overly praised, but you're also not humiliated in public, right? And then when I moved to a more multinational company, you see sort of polite assertiveness. So it's not that if people are asking you to do certain things, they would go about it in a roundabout way. There's assertiveness, but it's wrapped in this corporate speak, as we know. So it's very polite, it's very business oriented. And then one of the culture shocks that I got when I moved to Europe is the direct approach to giving feedback. Like here, if there's no complaint, it means you're doing a good job. It's very specific as well. So and brutally honest. So if you are doing something that they don't like, they will tell you specifically what it is. So you know exactly what needs to change. And there's a brutal honesty to it. One of the things that I noticed was in certain cultures, when you ask how are you, the response is an immediate I'm good, it's good, I'm okay. But in certain cultures, if you ask how are you, they will actually tell you. So there's a specific honesty, and that directness is something that takes some getting used to. So if you're in a mentorship relationship, you have to be able to balance these things. And I'm not saying one is better the other. I think we can learn from this diversity of feedback spectrum, that in certain situations and based on the person, you can be indirect, you can do subtle, right? Based on the situation, you can be just a business casual, or in some cases you have to be brutally honest. I think there's no right or wrong way to do it, but it's something to be aware of, that if you're dealing with people from other culture, they might think that being brutally honest is is shaming them, um, or the other way around, that if you are saying something good and you're doing about it in a other way, then it will be taken as you're not really giving me good feedback. So I think it's just important to note that we have different feedback styles and it varies, so we have to be adaptable. Whether you're a mentee or a mentor, it's something to be aware of. Another challenge that I noticed was the technology gap. So as I mentioned, I went from pure traditional mainframe specific tools and methods. So we are using just mainframe specific tools and processes. And then I moved to a more hybrid combination of tools and methods and so on. But I've also had the privilege of working with students or mentees, apprentices they lean towards open source, agile, they want to move fast and break things. So again, I'm not saying that we put down one or the other, but I'm saying that in even in technology, we should embrace this diversity, right? Because we can learn from um, how processes are working. So right now, agile is being implemented in more traditional mainframes environments and so on. But then we also want to make sure that the traditional values of we want 99% uptime and so on, we don't just break things because we can. I think we can again learn, and sometimes it's a challenge to um, be a mentor or a mentee for example, when I'm teaching um, traditional mainframe developers new stuff like modern IDEs or some sort. There's a hesitation, right? But it's about openness to it and about curiosity. And the other way around, that some students, for example, they don't want to learn how to code in ISPF and so on. But I think there should be a balance in all of these tools and in the value of this hybrid and combination of tools and methods and processes, because we can learn and um, from all the sides, right? And then the last part is of the challenges category is mindset. So first one is unconscious bias. So in terms of mentorship, for example, we can make quick judgments and assessments. And I saw one example of a TED Talk. So Robin Hauser, as pictured here, she has a TED Talk called the likability dilemma for women leaders. So she discussed the 2003 Heidi and Heidi/Howard Roizen experiment by Professor Frank Flynn at Columbia Business School. So the Heidi Roizen is actually a real person. She is a successful Silicon Valley venture capitalist, and she's the subject of the study. So Professor Flynn presented half the class with a case study about Heidi. And then the second half of the class, he gave an altered case study. The only change was the name from Heidi to Howard. So it became Howard Roizen. So the students evaluated Howard versus Heidi, and they found both equally competent. So the question was not about competence, but they found Howard more likable than Heidi. And then they would like to hire Howard more than Heidi, and they would like to emulate Howard more than Heidi. And the students were men, women. So even the women would has an unconscious bias that Heidi, they think she's confident, but um, she considered her too aggressive. Whereas Howard, he's confident, and they found him smart, likable, and they would like to emulate it. So I think we have to be conscious about we have to be conscious about unconscious bias, because it's quick judgment and assessment that we have to pause and think before we say, I want this to be my mentor, I want this to be my mentee. We have to do away with saying this person has to be a certain way because of their gender, right? And I think, to me, what I got from this talk was that there needs to be visibility. So I'm talking about visibility of women in IT. So talking about visibility means that if I can see somebody that I want to emulate, then I can also see myself being that person, right? If all I see are men leaders, or if all of my mentors are men, how can I see myself, envision myself in that role? And so I think, to me, the goal of doing these talks and doing this um, women in IT presentations, to me, it's about the visibility that women can be leaders, and likability is something that is an unconscious bias, but the competence is still what's important. And then you go to hierarchical norms. So it's another different mindset, right? So sometimes mentees can be very enthusiastic about a topic, but seniors take offense to that if you question me, or if you question my judgment, then you are insubordinate or something. But I think we have to challenge these norms as well, because, as I mentioned, it should be mutual learning. We can learn something from the juniors, and the juniors, of course, can learn something from the seniors. So we should not stomp on their enthusiasm if they're asking questions. So when the apprentice asks me, why are we doing this way? It's not about I question your judgment. It's just about, I'm curious. I want to know why we're working the way we're working. And then, of course, another challenge in mentorship is the way of working. Some cultures have good work boundaries, and some require you to be available online at any moment in time. So I think it's just something to navigate that with, especially if you're in a remote mentorship role. For example, you have to be conscious about when to schedule stuff. For example, in Austria, there is some unwritten rule that it's considered rude to schedule meetings after 2 p.m. on a Friday. But in some cases, a Friday is a Friday, it's a work day, right? So it's just being conscious of that, and also being adaptable. And then the last part in the mindset category is emotional labor. So there's always this pressure to fit in or be the expert, but I think it is not helpful. The pressure to be perfect is not helpful. So if I just pretend to be an expert, I don't ask for help, how can I actually be an expert, right? If I ask for help, that provides the opportunity for others to mentor me, and I don't have to pretend that just to fit in, I know everything or I agree with everything, right? So I can ask questions, as I said, I can um, provide a different opinion. I don't have to just go with the flow. I don't have to always just fit in, especially as women, as we mentioned, being assertive is sometimes looked at as being aggressive, but there's a pressure to fit in, but it's not helpful to anybody. So I think the more that we ask questions or that we ask for help, we build a learning culture. And so that's the next part. A good mentorship fosters a learning culture and not just a learning transaction. So it's not just one way that I teach you, you learn. It's not. It should be a culture of learning. So how do we do that? So safe spaces for curiosity. I think we need to provide safe spaces for curiosity. It should always start with questions. We encourage vulnerability, asking questions, and not knowing something should never be a source of shame. So I've definitely experienced this that as I said, in Asia, there's a importance in saving face. You don't want to ask. You don't want to say that you don't know something. But I don't think it should be a source of shame because these are learning opportunities, right? So if I am being vulnerable, saying, "Can you teach me how this works? I want to shadow you." I think that's something that I've definitely said. I want to I want to learn, but I want to learn by watching you do it, and then I will do it. So that's vulnerability. It's saying that I am in a position of learning. And then normalize asking from all sides. Seniors can ask juniors and vice versa. So again, when we go back to the technology gap, where if I'm already working in a hybrid environment or environment where I'm still working with traditional mainframe tools, but now we're working with Git and we're working with Python and I'm working with all of this shell scripting and so on in USS. I think it's important that there's an openness that seniors can also ask, can you show me how to do this? Can you show me how to um, create a merge request and so on, a pull request? And so I think this safe spaces for curiosity is for everybody. It's not just for mentees, it's for mentors as well. Um, because sometimes you are a junior in one thing, but you're a senior in some other thing and vice versa. And then the next is a trusting work environment. So this is where the title of the presentation comes from. Own your origin story. And by that I mean share where you came from, where you're coming from, and not just your cultural background, but your technology background. Because sometimes their question is coming from, I've only worked at a startup that does this, this, this. And so me coming to this environment of a waterfall, for example, or a more traditional coding environment where we have to check in and check out code and so on. So coming from um, a place of storytelling, of sharing your background, it's easier to empathize, right? If I tell you a story of my origin story of where I was coming from, of all the different backgrounds that I have, it's very easy to say, oh, I can relate to this part, I can relate to this part. So finding that common ground is a good place to build trust. So storytelling and empathy are tools we can use. By storytelling, we can humanize our our experiences, our work environment, and so on. And that includes sharing wins and struggles. Normalize moments of confusion. So again, it should not be a source of shame to say, I've struggled with this. Because again, in a storytelling and empathy point of view, if you're struggling with something, for example, I don't know how to create a PDF and I ask somebody, then now I know how to do it and I can also pass that forward, right? It becomes a loop. The important part here is authenticity. So be authentic to who you are. Your background is important because you can teach other people from your own perspective, from your background. There's no right or wrong way to approach certain things. It should be a collaboration, right? So the next part there is that mentorship is mutual. When mentorship is mutual, it becomes more sustainable. So as I said, because we are doing that loop, we are creating a community, we are growing the community. And it's just important to find your niche in that community, whether you're mentee, mentor, or contributor, collaborator. I think it's important that we provide that safe space for
Sure.
curiosity and good working environment built on trust. So when you're finding your niche, I have some suggestions. So for example, you can find apprentice programs. First is searching for them, whether a mentee or a mentor. You can search for apprenticeship programs and mentorship programs. The next part would be you actually go through training, mentorship, and real world projects. And then the outcome would be confident contributor. So whether you're a mentee now that you can contribute to the code base or to your company or to your community, or as a mentor, now you've produced a colleague that you can actually trust because you've trained them, you know that they've done real world projects. So just some example of apprentice programs. So we have the Open Mainframe Project mentorship program. So there are some open mainframe project ambassadors who could mentor you, or you can apply. And then we have the IBM Z Global Skills Accelerator program as well, where mentees and mentors can apply. And then from my own personal experience, in our company, we have internal apprentice programs, as I mentioned, and also university programs. So just to give my personal experience. So this is one group of apprentices that I've taught. So we did mainframe modernization course, and here they are with Z14 that was donated by Beta Systems to Leipzig University. So now some of these apprentices are now my colleagues, so they've moved on to in our company. And also I want to highlight that maybe if you're a mentee looking for a place to start, maybe there are some universities that are doing mainframe courses, or you can find some companies that are near you that are doing apprentice programs, especially in mainframe. So I think it's important to first search. And also another tool is maybe find something on the agenda. I like this topic. Maybe I can approach this person to be my mentor. I think that's a good place to start. So apprentice programs are something that we, as mentees or mentors, we can find our niche there. And then another part is continuous learning. So whether you're a mentee or a mentor, I think we can value getting hands-on experience. Again, as I said, even if you're just used to coding in ISPF screens and you want to experience IDEs, modern IDEs, for example, then there are programs that are available, open, just sign up, and then you can have your hands-on experience. And by doing continuous learning, you're future-proofing your skills. So when you are a mentee in certain skills and also mentoring certain skills, then you're still part of the community, you're still collaborating. And then we have the concept of reverse mentoring, which is just the mentee is now providing some more feedback and instruction to more senior colleagues. It goes back to that mentorship loop, right? It's mutual. So some examples of mainframe modernization courses, if you would like to do continuous learning, again, the Open Mainframe Project has a COBOL programming course. So I've experienced this personally, all three of these. And then IBM Z Explorer, these are more for if you want to, either you're a student who wants to learn or your first taste of mainframe, or you have been working with mainframe and you want to look at the more modern tools like IDEs, Zoe, etc. And then I have personal experience leading a course, mainframe modernization course with European Mainframe Academy. So I was teaching Java to COBOL developers using IDEs and so on. So what my personal experience is, what I did to sort of do storytelling and empathy with them was to provide certain commonalities between COBOL and Java, for example. So this is my example, my practical example. Like, I explained that both COBOL and Java there's a concept of write once, run anywhere because of the compiler and the Java runtime environment. When explaining data types, comp is equivalent to float, for example. So they can relate that immediately because they are COBOL developers. And then another example is the concept of Java packages can be very abstract, but if you explain it, when I explained it as it's just similar to your high-level qualifier, you have your first qualifier, which is the main class, and so on and so on. So it's just a way of finding that commonality. And then one of the things that was appreciated was using the same IDE for both. So this is where we were doing IntelliJ plugin of Zoe Explorer, IntelliJ plugin. So it was appreciated that they were able to use the same IDE for Java, for COBOL, for mainframe resources, datasets, jobs, and so on. So it's a good way of creating that environment of I know this and I'm learning this, so I'm creating that environment of it's not that foreign to me. So my tips for new mentors or mentees: prioritize authenticity over perfection. Again, there should not be a pressure to always be perfect. Be your authentic self, share your background, share where you're coming from, and that should be your priority over saying, I know everything. I'm a know it all. I already know these things, or I know the best way to do stuff. Um, yeah. And then the next is empathy over expertise. So instead of being offended that some people do things a certain way or code things in a certain um, in certain form or tool, I think we should empathize based on diverse backgrounds and so on. And the last part is know your boundaries but lean into discomfort. So knowing your boundaries, especially for example as a mentee, know when to know which questions to ask. And for mentors, know where to step back and let them make mistakes and so on. And but lean into discomfort. So you should know your boundaries, but at the same time, maybe it's difficult for you to learn Git or pull requests or Python or Java or other more modern languages. Um, Node.js, for example, was complicated for me to learn. But when you lean into discomfort, you become a mentee and you will find mentors that are willing to teach you. Again, the more important part is having that hands-on experience. So boundaries are important, but sometimes some discomfort when change is required is also helpful. So finally, my key takeaways. Mentorship is mutual. So if you're going to take anything from this talk, mentorship is mutual. So it's not just a one-way street. You can be a mentee in one topic, you can be a mentor in another topic. And diversity enriches mentorship, whether that's feedback, technology, mindset. We can learn from each other. By navigating those differences, we create a more inclusive environment where we build trust, where it's safe space to be curious because all of us are learning from each other. If we're curious and empathic, we can bridge these gaps, whether that's language, time zone, culture, technology. It's when we are when we're collaborating, working together, as I said in the beginning, we are speaking the same mainframe language, right? And finally, you have something to offer no matter your background. So own your origin story. Think whether you're a newbie, you're coming from a distributed background, or you have been in frames for 40 years, you have something to offer. You can teach somebody something. And that is it. Thank you so much. Let's see if we have some questions.
Thanks a million, Rochelle. That was absolutely brilliant. And we have one comment in the chat from Jelly. I agree with the value of fresh perspectives. Sometimes young team members have different points of view on how they understand and see things, and this challenges me to think about mainframes differently. When I train new team members, I try my best to adapt my understanding to match theirs so that I can help them understand mainframes better. Have you had any experiences like that? If yes, how did you manage it?
Thank you for that question. Yes. So when there are new team members, for example, whether that's new team members that I am teaching COBOL Rex 2 or JCLs, or if it's the other way around, that it's more experienced mainframers that I'm teaching open source tools to. I think again, it should go back. I always go back to storytelling. So how did I experience this? How if I was the one that was using these tools in the beginning, how did I learn? And so I think when I share my story, it becomes easier for them to empathize, and also that I'm not saying that I didn't struggle in the beginning. I always say this is where I struggled, and so if you're struggling, it's okay. You can ask questions. So to me, when I'm teaching, especially the apprentices, there's a certain openness that you need to have, because they they don't like to do certain things that are fixed. They always want to ask questions. They want to use their mouse to to submit JCLs, for example. And so the value there is to say, yes, you can do this now, but the reason why it was being done in this way before was because of this. So I think the question of why is something that it's important for them to to hear your reasoning behind, and also for you to reflect, should we actually do it in this way, and so on.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If you want to unmute yourself, because we have quite a small group, that would be okay to do. It's a very quiet bunch today. So I particularly was interested in your journey when you were talking about how you moved from place to place, and everywhere had different cultures and became more and more diverse as time went on. Because I've worked in the same company for longer than I care to admit. And I've seen over the past, 20 years or so, just that one company, it is getting an awful lot more diverse. And we've got more colleagues from all over the world, which I think is fantastic. But it is, you do have to get used to people's different cultures and different ways of doing things and ways of thinking, which it's an interesting one. Yeah, I thought that was really, really helpful. And I also like your feedback loop. I think sometimes people can mentor you without realizing they're mentoring you.
Correct.
Because mentorship was something that was never really talked about 15, 20 years ago. And now it's a big thing. But actually, I've always had mentors. I never knew they were mentors. I now know they're mentors. And I hope I mentor other people and they realize it. I have some official mentees where, there's a mentorship program, but there are other people that I would hope maybe I'm of use to them, and without being an official mentor, I am mentoring them.
I agree. It doesn't have to be official, for sure. Yeah.
So does anyone else have anything? And with that, given that I'm not seeing anybody else, I think what we're going to do is say thank you very, very much to Rochelle for an excellent presentation. I would really like to give her a big round of applause. I don't know if that effect is still there anymore. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everybody, please, please, please remember to give your feedback for this session. So the session is 1A. Another important thing to note is that question 1, when it asks the length of the session, 1 means it's too short, 9 means it's way too long, 5 is the perfect answer. For everything else, 1 is the best. Our next session for the WIT stream is tomorrow afternoon at 12:30. It's called Breaking Barriers, the Power of Diversity in Tech. And I'm really, really looking forward to that. So 12:30 tomorrow. Until then, please find some excellent technical training sessions throughout the day and over the next couple of days. And with that, I think we're done.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
thank you very much, everybody.